Hi, I'm Helen Tupper.
And I'm Sarah Ellis.
And you're listening to the Squiggly Careers podcast, where each week Sarah and I come together to talk about a different topic to do with work and discuss practical ideas for action to help you find your way through your increasingly and our increasingly squiggly world of work.
And today we're going to be talking about overwhelm and how to kind of overcome overwhelm at work. So you can probably tell how we're both feeling right now.
I was about to say the irony of calling this topic. When you suggested it, I was like, yes, this is a good topic to cover. Let's get into this, please.
Well, let's face it. I think we originally started the podcast really for self-help, to help each other.
Yeah, it is all still self-help, isn't it?
Yeah, and I was preparing for this particular topic and just thinking, I mean, we are literally doing this for selfish reasons right now because we really need to know this stuff. And I think lots of people are feeling this way, and we've noticed it in our workshops over the last few weeks. So we were like, actually, do you know what? We've never really done a kind of deep dive into overwhelm. So what we're going to do today is talk a bit about what it is and how it gets in our way, though I suspect most of us know that and we don't need to spend too long on it. And what we've come up with is we thought we would go really practical today. So we've come up with 10 ideas for action on what to do in those moments where you do get overwhelmed at work, because I think, yes, we can work on how to prevent it, but it's also probably always going to happen some of the time. And we can probably predict that at some point we are just going to feel a bit overwhelmed. And I think it's almost what you do in those moments and the tools and the tactics that you can learn that can sort of help you find your way through that feeling of overwhelm to the other side as quickly and as positively as possible. So I'm sure there's lots of more psychology that we could chat through, but yeah, we've gone really, really practical for everybody. Again, I suspect this is because we were like, what can we do right now? So I was looking at overwhelm and what it means when our brains get overwhelmed. And I think there's actually one really important point that I hadn't considered before, which is, so when we are overwhelmed, it's that almost the complexity of everything that's happening surpasses the complexity of our mind. So we all recognise this sense of it all feels too much, but what we shouldn't mistake this for is a reflection of like our capability or our competence. So I think often our reaction to overwhelm is almost to blame ourselves or for our inner critic to come to life. And it's us going, this is my fault, I can't cope, and almost like beating ourselves up. What should I have done differently to stop this overwhelm from happening? But actually, it is just when everything gets too complicated and lots of that stuff is actually out of our control, which is almost why we've spent a bit less time today on kind of the preventing it, because it's kind of a natural reality, I think, in squiggly careers in modern life. So before we get into the idea for action, there are two things that you can do, which is spot your triggers and understand the impact for you, because we all have different triggers for overwhelm, particularly perhaps when we don't have everything that's happening quite right now in January 2021, and then know what does that mean for you. So rather than just kind of thinking about this generally, work out what does it look like for you, perhaps reflect on when you felt this before, and are there any themes or kind of trends that you can spot that then can be quite helpful, because it doesn't mean you could stop it completely, but it might just be kind of useful in terms of using some of these tactics. So some of the triggers, I'll just give you some of the examples that I saw come up a lot in lots of the reading I was doing. And then perhaps Helen, you and I will share the ones that are our big triggers. So managers can be a really big trigger of overwhelm. So another bit of work comes your way and you feel like you can't say no. Expectations of yourself or from other people, letting people down, which I guess those two things are linked. Maybe not getting the support that you need from other people. You know, that whole thing of it feeling too much, maybe you've got competing priorities. So lots going on personally, professionally. I can't believe anyone doesn't feel that one a little bit at the moment. And so, Helen, when you get that kind of real sense of this all feels like too much, what do you think triggers it for you?
For me, it's when I'm being chased for things. Let's say if you're chasing me for something, or Sarah, weirdly, another Sarah in our team, it might be chasing me for something, and it's all like meant with good intent. Or, you know, someone who we're working with is saying, oh, Helen, where's that bit of information or that resource or that video or whatever it is? And suddenly it's like a signal to me. I think it's a signal that I've not got it under control. Like, I think for me, if people are chasing me, something's gone wrong, because that's not a very Helen thing. Like, I'm normally the chaser. So if people are chasing me, I'm like, oh.
You want to be the chaser, not the chasee.
Yeah, I don't really want to be, but I think I probably normally am. But yeah, it makes me just think I've let something slip, or I'm not in control of this, or there's too many things moving at once. And it's the thing that makes me want to be like, I've got to find a way to get back on track.
Do you know, I was thinking about this a lot. I've worked out that one of my triggers is when I do get really overwhelmed, I go into the future. I quite enjoy spending time thinking about the future anyway, so that's kind of a nice place for me to spend time. And then I start to imagine what I'm going to do differently. I think about some quite like radically different things. So honestly, this week at some points, I was thinking, maybe what I'll do is I'll work a 4-day week in the summer. Honestly, I had this thought for about an hour. I was like, that could be quite a good
to do that.
I know, but I have worked a 4-day week before and I really enjoyed it. But you know, when you're like, but that's not what I want to do. It's my reaction. It's my response to feeling overwhelmed is I start to think, oh, this could be different. Or maybe I should try that. And because I think I like ideas, I come up with ideas that are sort of in the future. So, and then I think once you start to spot your triggers, and I'm sure all of them at some point impact us, but some impact us more than others, then kind of know what is your response or how does it start to show up for you. Actually, there's quite a lot of evidence around when we're overwhelmed, you get really forgetful. Probably, I guess, because you've got so much going on in your head, you just, you can't keep everything in your mind, so you just forget things. Maybe that's when you do, like, you know, when you lock yourself out or you lose your phone. It's almost like in those moments you're already overwhelmed anyway, and then you're like, oh great, now I've just lost my phone. Or
it's so funny because just before
I lose
this
cards.
podcast,
I lose debit cards. That's what I do.
Well, just before we started recording today, it's really funny because I was feeling a bit like this. So it's, we're recording on Friday, at the end of Friday. You know, we've got quite a few things on at the moment with like books and various things that we're doing. And Sarah, because Sarah basically is planning the completion of the book that we have to get over to Penguin in 2 weeks' time. And Sarah's like managing the completion of it. And so it's very clear about what needs to be done when, and has obviously come to the end of this week with a lot of clarity and is now thinking about what needs to be done when next week. But my brain can't really cope. To your point about forgetting, when you were going through that, you're like, okay, that needs to be done on Wednesday. And I was like, okay, I've got to put it in my diary because I don't think I can retain. I think I'm on Friday. A lot's gone on and I'm sort of tipping into overwhelm a little bit because I'm going into the weekend feeling like I've not done everything I need to do. I was thinking when you were saying that, I was like, I don't think I can retain. So I can, that forgetfulness thing, I can see how it's real.
So forgetful, confusion. You know, you don't have the clarity that perhaps you have the rest of the time. Perhaps you're chatting to someone in your team and you're thinking, why am I not getting this? It's almost like your brain's a bit full up. That's the way I think of it. And when I was reading about how we typically respond to overwhelm, pretty much what everyone says is, oh, I just work harder and longer. And I was just thinking, I mean, so there was quite a lot of case studies of, oh, well, the answer is basically to get up at 4:30 or 5 a.m. and just be like, okay, well, that's how I will then get through those things. Yeah, blitz it, basically. Or if you're me, because I'm never going to get up I hate mornings, but like you just work really late. Or you work weekends, you just basically work more and more and more. So you're already overwhelmed and then you're like, just going to keep going, which I do get it.
Occasionally, you can clear the decks and then start afresh. However, I think that if that is your continual coping strategy, it's not really going to end well, is it? If your continual coping strategy for overwhelm, when you're probably only going to get more information and more things to do, is to work harder and longer, at some point that's going to backfire.
Yeah, and actually and these things are always nuanced, aren't they? I was actually reading a few examples of people saying, sometimes it can be really helpful to carve out some time where you might not normally work, and it's not about making it a habit, but where you do create enough sense of you've kind of done the things you need to do so that you can have the space and the sense of clarity that you need. So like if it was me, I wouldn't normally get up early to do work, ever. But I can imagine myself sometimes doing that. Actually, I have done it in the past where I've just thought, I think that would just actually really help me right now, but I'm not going to make a habit of it. Or like, I am going to do 3 hours worth of a bit of work at a weekend, which again is not something I would normally do, but you might think, okay, in this moment that feels okay. And I think that's okay too. I don't think we should feel too bad about that. Well, I think we're both saying that because we both do it.
Yeah, we do that.
And so what I think was missing when I was reading lots of the articles about overwhelm, which is kind of the points that we've talked about so far, is really the summary is everyone just sort of goes, oh, pinpoint the primary source of the overwhelm, then just like do something about it. And I was like, okay, but what do you want me to do about it? Like, what are the things? So this is where we were like, right, we have tried to come up with 10 ideas for action of what you could do in those moments of feeling overwhelmed. Short, specific ideas to try out. maybe we'll write these up as well so that you've got them somewhere that you can download.
Yeah, we'll put them on amazingif.com, and I'll probably also get a post on Instagram at amazingif that you can just swipe through so that you can see all of these.
And I'm sure you know some of these already. You might like some more than others. If you've got other ones, things that have worked really well for you as well, let us know on Instagram, where we're just at amazingif, and we can add those to the list. But this is what we could come up with.
Our 10 top tips for combating overwhelm.
In probably about 10 minutes. So here we go. Okay, number 1, difference between good enough and great. And I think in moments of overwhelm, especially if you are someone who is a perfectionist, might like to spend time over things, really think things through. I don't think I'm a perfectionist, but I'm quite considered in what I like to do, is sometimes just knowing I've got to get some of this stuff done, and good enough is absolutely fine for now. And I have actually done this week. There are some times where I've sent emails where I've thought, usually I would craft that a bit further, or I'd think about that a bit more. I bet you I have sent emails this week with some typos in, which I really, really don't like the idea of that. But because I have done some things quickly and recognised that I've needed to, I've sort of also gone, I think people will forgive me for that. And I think it's okay. And I'm still doing kind of all the right things. So one of the things that can be quite useful is on a Monday, if you're feeling really overwhelmed, maybe at the start of your week, just be really clear about what are the things that actually have to be great this week, because that's usually a very short list. And if everything else is good enough, that's probably fine, and your good enough is probably still pretty good. Like, we all give ourselves a pretty hard time and put ourselves on a pedestal. So I always think, don't try and do a big long list. We don't need to spend more time doing more work when we're feeling overwhelmed. But I think if you just go, what needs to be great, I find that really, really helpful, because actually in a week, there's usually only one thing I'm doing, maybe 2 things I'm doing that have to actually be great.
So tip number 2, is it significant enough to sink the ship? So is the work that you are looking at, and there's probably going to be, if you're feeling overwhelmed, there might be more than one thing that you're trying to do at one time. Which of those things is significant enough to sink the ship? And what we mean by that is, how much does it really, really matter? So if you're working on something that is really important to your job, you might even think it's career critical, then it's likely that it might be overwhelming, but that might be one of the things where you're like, okay, I know it's overwhelming. I've just got to get through it. I'm going to put all of my energy behind it. But you know why you're doing it. It's because it's such a significant piece of work. There might be some other things that you look at and you say, well, if I'm doing some kind of significance scale here, this isn't at the top. I can see what's at the top and it's not this. And that might be something that you can pause or you could reprioritize. But if you think about that scale of significance, like if I thought about, well, what are 5 things that I'm working on now? And there might be some things with clients, some things on social media, some content I'm creating, the book that we're writing. The most significant thing for me right now is the book that we're writing. And that's where all of my effort and energy should go. And maybe a way that I can control my overwhelm is by slowing some of the other things down, or pausing, or delegating, or finding something else to do, but really focusing on the thing that I think is the most significant, the most important. So just have a look at your work and almost think about a significant scale. What's at the top, what's maybe a bit more below, and just make sure that you're focusing your energy and efforts in the thing that's most important and not kind of trying to do everything at the same pace at the same time.
Action number 3 is about saying no. So saying no is sort of the classic response to what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed. You just need to say no loads more. Perhaps it's not just about saying no. It might be about thinking, when do you sometimes want to say not now? Doesn't mean not ever, just not now. And actually kind of finding ways to say no in kind of a way that works for you. So let me give you some examples here, because this is something I think I've got a lot better at. Sometimes people will ask me for things or be kind of interested in having a chat. And actually, I'm really interested in having a chat too. It's just that I can't do it right now. And so I think it's absolutely okay to say to somebody, really sorry that just over the next couple of weeks, I'm really busy. This is what I'm doing. But would March still work as a way to spend some time together? And most of the time people are like, yeah, that's absolutely fine. It's not a kind of time critical activity. I think sometimes you make something time critical that isn't. I would be like, oh yeah, should we catch up on Monday? And it's like, or could we catch up in a month and it would still be fine? It would still be fine. So I think practice the art of not now. And then I think the other thing on kind of saying no, I am so much more confident saying no if I can help in another way. So if I say no, either what I try to do is point people towards somebody else. And if I can make that introduction, I will. Or say, oh, I'm really sorry, I can't help with that at the moment, but this is an article you could go and have a look at. Or have you thought about reading this? Or have you thought about listening to this? And I think that works for me because I'm a naturally curious person, and I'm good at signposting resources for people in what we do. Kind of that works in our world, I guess. And I think there's been a few things where I felt quite bad in like January where someone sort of asked me for help and I thought I actually can't do that, and they clearly do need it now. But just by going, okay, well, I can't give you what you originally wanted, but this might still be helpful, but in a different way, again, helps me to say no. So I think it's probably right. I mean, if you can get brilliant at just saying no and that feels okay, then great. But the not now or no, but here's some help in a different way could be useful.
So tip number 4 really focuses on the to-do list. So I currently have one of these in my diary that is to the right of me right now. And I'm thinking there's quite a lot on that to-do list and it is quite daunting. What can be helpful when you're feeling overwhelmed is instead of thinking about a to-do list, you're still going to have to think about it, but get yourself a done list. Find a way of recognizing all the progress that you're making. So I have like some kind of like retro filofax thing that I love. I have like to-do list paper. And actually what I could do is create myself a done list that I can look back on. So rather than ending my week now and feeling a bit overwhelmed about all the work I've got to do, I could actually look at my done list and think, yeah, but look at everything you've done, Helen. Stop beating yourself up about the 5 things that are still there and think about the 50 things that you've done this week. And whether you do it in a diary or a bullet journal or you put post-it notes on a wall, it's a way that you can visibly see the progress that you're making, and it can just give you a sense of achievement when sometimes overwhelm can leave you losing a bit of perspective.
Number 5, I've stolen from my mental health first aid training, so you might have heard me talk about this before, and this is the idea of your stress bucket. So I think when everything feels too much, some of those things in your control, some of those things out of your control, the idea here is that it almost feels like your bucket has overflown. Everything's got kind of on top of you, there's too much stuff happening all at once, your bucket kind of overflows. And then if you imagine a tap on the side of that bucket, know what it takes to kind of release that tap, to kind of turn that tap on that lowers that water level and reduces your stress. And this is different for everyone, but the best thing I think I've kind of done this week is even when I have been incredibly busy, felt really overwhelmed, I've still gone for a walk. It actually feels really counterintuitive. Like I was quite tempted one day this week to kind of say to Helen, oh, but I am still working. It's a really weird feeling of like, when you've got a lot on, and I imagine this is harder for everybody else. Like if you're in an organisation, it must be harder than it is for you and I. If I still feel like that, like there was one day this week where I think I'd said to you, oh, I'm just nipping out for a walk. And then I felt a bit bad and I was like, oh, Helen probably thinks like, why am I not working on the book? And it is like incredible how hard you have to work to do those things. But those things are the things that release your stress and kind of lower that water level. So if you feel like your stress bucket is starting to overflow, know what it looks like for you. And I do think it feels counterintuitive, but that 10 minutes of mindfulness, that walk with your dog, going to get a coffee, doing something different, anything that you just know you always feel better after doing it. I think it sounds simple, but it's actually loads harder than it sounds.
I actually, in case it helps you, Sarah, I would never think that of you going on a walk.
Oh.
And also, it just makes me think that, it makes me happy that you found something that works for you, but it also just makes me think, what's my thing? As in, that's a really good thing that Sarah's doing. So actually, every time you do say that to me, it just makes me more conscious of, have I really prioritised that for myself? It's actually helpful for me when you share those things, if it stops you worrying in any way about some negative thoughts that I'm having about it.
Some couples therapy for us
There you go. So tip number 6 is about just beware of trying to do it all yourself. So if you have got lots on, that point that Sarah mentioned right at the beginning, which is that sometimes that default response is just to work harder, faster, longer until you burn out. It's not a great conclusion to that one. Instead, just have a think about who can help you and what you can delegate. And sometimes I think delegate is a tricky word because people think, well, I've got nobody that works for me, so who can I delegate this to? So if delegate as a concept doesn't feel that comfortable to you, just think about who could help you. You're not necessarily asking them to do your job for you forever. You're just asking for some help right now. And that help might be helping you to write a report because you know that they're really good at it and maybe they can do it quicker than you. I don't know what the answer is, but look around you at who might have some skills, some time, an ability to help you, and ask them for that help. just be confident enough to say, I've got loads on at the moment. I'm struggling a bit to get everything done. I'd really appreciate your help with this thing. Would it be possible? Just be specific, be genuine, be brave. And often people will give you that help that you need. And it might just help you get over this sort of work hump that you might be experiencing at the moment.
And there's a good quote actually from John Maxwell, who's done a lot of work on leadership. He says, if something can be done 80% as well by someone else, delegate. And I think, it doesn't have to say delegate in a traditional sense. It can just be like, don't feel like you're the only one who could do that thing. Yeah. I sometimes do think we think, oh yeah, but I know this really well, and it's going to take someone else. And then you start to realise you're like, oh, actually everyone else can sort of do what I do, and it's fine. Number 7, I have borrowed some brilliance from Adam Morgan, who wrote a brilliant book called Beautiful Constraints. He introduced me to this idea of can-if thinking. And what can-if thinking does is it gets you to come up with solutions to get the things that kind of matter most done, I think. And I'm sort of applying his thinking to careers here and to overwhelm. So if you're thinking, I'm really struggling with this, I've got too much on, I'm kind of not going to meet my deadline, this doesn't feel like it's possible. Perhaps you feel like you're more in the can't and impossible rather than can and possible frame of thinking. If you do can-if thinking and kind of statements, you work out what needs to happen. So with our book at the start of this year, originally, I actually can't remember what our original deadline was, but it was sometime in January.
Yeah, I think it was
late January. And I said to Helen, we're not going to make it. And then what we sort of realised was, we can still deliver kind of a full draft of the book if we get an extension of a couple of weeks on our deadline, and if we make some choices and changes in terms of how we're both spending our time. And then started to get really specific about what that's looked like. Now, whether we'll quite make it, I think...
We will make it.
We will. But we actually did this and it worked so well for us. And then sometimes you're in control of that completely. So some of the choices and changes about time, like Helen and I have done for ourselves. And one of our we can ifs also relied on us talking to our publisher and saying, this is the reality. This is kind of where we are. We are doing everything that we can to go as quickly as we possibly can. But there are some factors that mean that we can't speed up so much that we're going to meet the original deadline. Does this still work? And it does. And I think sometimes if you've done that thinking and you're really thoughtful about it, people see that. You're not just kind of doing it because you're like, I can't be bothered. Oh, it just feels a bit hard. You're doing it because you've really thought about it and you need that. And you're like, we can still do a brilliant job of this project that is the one thing that is on the top of my significance scale, the one thing that I need to do brilliantly and needs me to be at my best. Could be about support from your partner, could be about stopping one project for 3 weeks. Just try that can-if statements for yourself. I can do this brilliantly if XXX. What would that look like? Have a go. The more you start to practice it, the kind of easier it gets.
I think as well, if a manager is contributing to your overwhelm because maybe they just keep adding to the workload, can-if thinking could really help, even more than can-if thinking, can-if response. So it might be, I can pick that up if we move this other thing back. And just getting really confident and consistent with your can-if response to them, it will force them to make choices and it prevents you having to continually add on top of everything you're already doing. Tip number 8 for you is to get somebody else's perspective on how they would manage the overwhelm that you're experiencing. So sometimes when we've got a lot on and you lose perspective, it's a bit like that. You can't see the wood for the trees, all you can see is the work. And so you can't find your way through it. There's just lots of work. But for example, if I felt like I had loads on and I couldn't see the wood for the trees and I just took a moment and thought, well, what would Sarah do? What would Sarah do? She would get a flipboard in her living room and she'd put grids and red, amber, green statuses and have one thing that she would do every day and she would be relentlessly focused on that. That's what Sarah would do. If I thought about what my husband would do if he had loads of work on, Gareth, my husband, he's very good with boundaries. So he wouldn't work and work and work. He would set himself a deadline. He would do it. He meditates when he's overwhelmed and that's the way he gets some perspective back as well. And so I might do a blend of both of those, but the thing it would help me to do is get out of my head and my solutions, which might not be working at this point, and actually just think about, well, okay, if I tried to do it like them, I might just find a new way forward and a different way of approaching a problem and a bit of overwhelm that I might be struggling with.
So that was one way of getting perspective. And then number 9 is a different way of getting perspective. And that is to read, watch, or listen to something which is kind of about a cause or a topic or a person that just feels bigger than you. Let me explain that a little bit more. So like this week, for example, it genuinely really helped me. I watched a bit of a documentary about Barack Obama's final kind of year of administration. And watching that really put things in perspective. When him and his team were in Syria, and then they were talking about like the decisions they make, and some of it is heartbreaking, but also watching this incredible woman do the work that she did at the UN, and just sort of it takes you out of your world. When you're overwhelmed, you're very in your own world. I am, certainly. I get very very focused. I get very single-minded. My partner was watching this documentary. I was still working at my desk, and then I did stop. I was so overwhelmed. I was still working and watching the documentary at the same time. But then I stopped and I was like, oh no, I'm going to have a cup of tea. I'm going to watch it for a bit. And I was so glad that I did, because, you just think, oh yeah, there probably are more important things than like this paragraph that I'm trying to write. It's not to try and diminish what you're doing, and it's not to stop you caring. I just sometimes think it is a helpful reminder of like what you're doing is important, and also there's a big wide world out there, and I find that a useful reminder. Some people might go, oh, I don't need that, but it worked for me, so I thought I'd include it.
I like it. My last one's really, it's like top 10 tactical tips. Yeah, it's really tactical, everybody. I don't know if there's any psychology in this at all, but it works for me. My tip is to clean up. Bear with me. So I think if you are feeling really overwhelmed, when you are in your messy brain and at a messy desk and looking at a messy notebook, I don't think it helps. I think it's just all lots of like work noise that can sometimes feel really difficult. So I think you've got to find a way to clean up your brain and your desk and your to-do list. Some ideas for you. If you want to clean up your brain, get out of the busyness, meditation would be the way of doing that. It doesn't work for everybody. I actually find journaling probably works for me better than meditation, but it's just think about how you get your brain to stop worrying, like the noise to stop happening, whether it's meditation or journaling or something else, maybe exercising actually, but clean up your brain. Clean up your desk. Like for me, if I've got a messy desk, my desk's actually quite clean at the moment. If it's really messy and I've got wires and cables everywhere, it just like adds to my stress and overwhelm. So for me, a clear desk works. Clean up your to-do list. Some people might not think this is a very good use of time, but sometimes when I'm looking at my list and there's crosses and ticks and different colour pens, taking 5 minutes to just neaten up my list and put like some dates on it and put it in an order, it just gives me a sense of control and doability back. Your notebook, I will start a blank page. So if I'm like, okay, time to get serious, Helen, just starting like a blank page. I've even gone dramatic sometimes and started a whole new notebook when I'm like, right, this is serious. Clean up your day. I'm not saying that you can always not be in all the meetings that are in your diary, but it might be possible to say, do you know what, for this one day, I'm going to ask someone else to represent me in that meeting. I'm going to delay that other meeting. So you can basically create yourself a bit of time in the day. It might not be realistic to do it every week of every month, but for one day, you could probably move things around to give yourself a bit of space in your diary. And even your email, even cleaning up your email, drastic things I've done before. Please, if you do this, anyone listening and you get into trouble, don't blame me. But before, when I was getting too many emails, I set up a rule that everything that I was CC'd in onto went into a folder that I never looked at. It
not
massively...
now, I hope.
No, not now. I have different rules now, different flags now.
Oh, yeah.
But so it like massively cut down the amount of email that I had to sift through. And to be honest, if it was that important, someone would chase me and they would send... I had basically a rule. My managers, I always read emails from my manager. Everything else that was CC'd went into a folder that I didn't look at. And then if it was that important, people chased me. And people hardly ever chased me. Hardly ever. And it was fine. And sometimes now, even when my inbox has got really overwhelming, I'll basically just think clean slate. I copy and paste it all into like January 2021 and start again. Just start again. So thinking
how much my desktop would stress you out right now.
I bet it would.
But hopefully there's something there. And just as a final point to finish with, I think everybody can just support each other right now. I've actually seen some really nice things on Instagram where like I see people go, if somebody's got a toddler, just know that the toddlers are winning right now. So see how people are doing. I think it was Man versus Baby, and it really made me laugh. Now, I'm lucky my toddler's still at nursery, so I'm winning. I think just thinking, if people are feeling overwhelmed, we can all just like support each other, and we're all feeling overwhelmed some of the time at the moment. I think like Helen and I are having to like support each other probably more than we are usually, because we're all kind of struggling a little bit. So use those support groups, use those WhatsApp groups.
And like
talk
find
to
a way
someone
to
about
smile. Like I was thinking this week,
Yeah, that's a good idea
some of
as
those
well.
funny things that have been shared on the news, like that lawyer or the judge that was like
Cat
had
thing.
that cat filter. I think some of those, like finding moments to make you smile as well, are
Yeah.
also healthy. So maybe that's like a secret extra tip number 11 and 12. The support and smiles will also help with the overwhelm.
Yeah, we didn't think about those beforehand, did we? So that's why they've been added in at the end.
They've been added in. Tip number 11 and 12. Quick, get those in. Well, thank you so much for listening, everybody. We will be back with you next week with another topic. If you found this helpful, do let us know. Like Sarah said earlier, you can get in touch with us at AmazingIf on Instagram. We do love to hear from people. It helps us to know that we're not just talking to ourselves on a podcast.
Though, to be fair, I feel like today we were just talking to ourselves.
I think maybe we were just talking to ourselves. But yeah, let us know if it's helpful for you too. That's always nice to hear. And as ever, if you do have any spare time that you could possibly give us for 1 or 2 minutes to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast, it's one way that we can find more people, we can help more people, and maybe we can help them with that overwhelm too. So we'd hugely appreciate that if you do have the time to do it.
Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye.